The security guard's fingers dug into my arm, and the marble beneath my feet felt suddenly like ice. People were filming phones, held up like a wall of little rectangles, while a woman near the fountain whispered, "Is she trespassing?" A bell chimed somewhere behind me, a distant, cheerful sound that felt cruel in that moment. I was being dragged toward the revolving doors of a hotel that I'll always call home, because the man walking toward that same lobby is my husband. The elevator dinged open. He stepped out. The air changed. Before I go any further, if you want to follow the rest of this story and others like it, hit subscribe and stay with me. There's more than one lesson here, and I promise it's worth your time. I want you to know one thing right away. I married the man, not the money. That is the thread that holds the whole story together. Years ago, I worked double shifts at a diner's stainless steel counters, coffee that never slept. The kind of place where you learn people's orders by heart and how to keep smiling when everything inside you is exhausted. That was where I met Audra. He came in late one night, tired from business travel, and he had a way of looking at the world that made me look back differently. We laughed over burnt toast and shared road trip playlists. I told him about the long hours and the little victories. He fell for who I was. I fell for who he was. When he built his hotels, I never stopped being me. I kept the thrift store jeans, the chipped mugs, the habit of saving receipts in a shoebox. We built a life together, and money sat like a background color that never changed who I was at my center. So when I decided to surprise him at the flagship hotel, Grand Meridian, with its columned facade and glass atriumi, wasn't trying to make a scene. I wanted to see him, to bring him a stack of his mother's recipe cards he'd left at home, to be ordinary together for an afternoon. I stepped out of the taxi in jeans and a light jacket, hair pulled back with a band, holding the rough paper sleeve around the cards. The doorman nodded as if I was one more passerby. Inside, marble stretched like a polished river underfoot. Crystal chandeliers made a soft rain of reflection, but the lobby felt like a room where I didn't belong. Jessica behind the desk glanced up, and for a second, her smile didn't reach her eyes. She was the kind of receptionist who could make an entire room feel curated and cold. She asked for my name, as if she expected it to be something ordinary, like Mrs. Thompson. I told her simply, Camila Rodriguez. "I'm here to see my husband." There was a pause. She typed, slow enough to look purposeful. Then she looked back at me, and something in her face shifted in, almost smirk that made my stomach drop. "My card is in reading," she said, and her tone suggested I might be trying to pull a fast one. The check-in computer flashed something. The manager, Patricia, hovered behind her like a shadow with a perfect bun. Patricia asked for my ID, and when I handed it over, she inspected it as if it were a prop in a subpar play. "Reservations not found," she said in that clipped voice that removes any courtesy. Guests nearby shifted in their seats. A couple at a low table with a laptop pretended not to look, but their phones were already up. I reached for my phone to call Adrien. No service. I tried his name in the lobby search. No answer. The card machine blinked red. Jessica's hands hovered dramatically over the keys. You could feel the curiosity around us like static. That's when someone behind the desk used a phrase that sent heat up my neck. "We get a lot of," and she didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. The implication was loud in that room. My face flushed. It is a strange, sharp thing to be reduced to a stereotype in front of strangers. I asked again for them to call him. Patricia did, but with a clipped tone that suggested she expected to hear the line go busy. A front desk radio crackled. Someone called for security. I remember thinking, this is ridiculous, and not yet recognizing that ridiculousness could turn to something else entirely. A guard arrived, Frank, tall and flatted, and another, Tony, who looked like he learned his posture in a gym. They were polite at first. They asked for my ID. When it was offered, Tony reached and took it with hands that felt too firm for the exchange. Then the tone shifted. The questions were no longer routine. They started asking whether I had a reservation, whether I was registered as a guest, whether I had somewhere to stay. My answers, honest symbol, were met with skepticism. "If she has a card, it should read," Frank said, as if it were proof enough that I was lying. Someone behind them giggled and snapped a picture. Sophia, a staffer, who would later be filmed laughing, leaned in with her phone held high. Her laugh echoed like a bell in the space between my ribs and my throat. My hands trembled. I remember my bag slipping from my shoulder and falling to the marble with a thud. The stack of recipe cards spilled in a neat slate of paper across the floor. The bellboy bin, with a namatag hanging loose, kicked at them as if they were insignificant debris, and a fork clinked and slid between cards. A guest's phone captured the whole moment from the couch in front of the fountain. Somewhere, someone said, "Beauties like that don't belong here." The guard's grips tightened. My arm burned where Frank took hold, not cruelly, but with a professional force that communicated possession. "You will leave." They began to move me toward the exit. The public humiliation here wasn't loud in a cinematic way. It was small and precise. A rolled eye from a receptionist, a dismissive laugh, a shove. The crowd's murmurs grew in the soft, persistent way social media does. A whisper became a ripple became a tide. An older woman's salt hair, a knitted cardigan, small and quick, stood up from her seat and moved toward me. She didn't film. She didn't speak loudly. She just knelt, scooped up my scattered recipe cards, and handed them back with a look that was steady and human. "You can't let them do that," she whispered, and for a moment the world made sense again. Her hands were warm. The kindness she offered was ordinary and fierce, and it held me in a way nothing else did in those minutes. It happened fast. Videos of the scene started surfacing almost as soon as phones captured it. I didn't realize then how fast the story could travel. People called me names on camera. Some whispered questions about money, identity, and entitlement. Some pronounced me a fraud in squinted, judgmental tones. My cheeks burned. I tried to say, "I'm his wife," and the words came out small and drowned under the sound of the lobby. Audrine was supposed to be at a meeting. He wasn't due back for another 2 hours. I had planned a short surprise, a knock on the hotel door, a quick hello, and we would laugh it off. I didn't expect to make headlines, but the elevator dings have a way of changing everything. I heard the metallic chime before I saw him. When he walked into the lobby, the room contracted. The phones came down. The laughter died. He took in the scene, me with my coat half unbuttoned, recipe cards in a small, trembling hand, the guard's hand still on my arm, the smirk on Patricia's face, and he moved with a silence that had weight. He didn't shove anyone. He didn't rage. He walked straight to the desk and stood there, and when he spoke, his voice carried like a bell. "What is happening here?" Audrine asked. No one met his eyes at first. Jessica's shoulders tightened. Patricia's voice tried for authority, but it broke around the edges when he asked, "Who called security?" There was a flurry, then a series of clipped exchanges, radio crackle, a manager's attempt to explain, and me standing in the middle of it all, feeling absurdly small. He asked me if I was hurt. He asked to see my ID. He asked how I had been treated. The questions were simple and steady, like the hands of someone used to examining a problem until it made sense. Then he did something that I don't take lightly. He asked to see the security footage. I stood by with the paper edges of the recipe cards between my fingers, while Audrine and the regional director, Mr. Harper, watched. A monitor flickered to life with the security feed. The camera angle showed the entire stretch of the lobby. The fountain, the reception, a table where a man sipped espresso, the revolving doors. We watched the tape in a silence that hummed. There I was walking in, handing over a card, being ignored. Jessica's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Patricia looked disdainful. The footage captured Sophia stepping in with a laugh, Ben kicking at my things, Frank and Tony moving with professional efficiency as if I were a problem to be solved. On the screen, it was clinical, straightforward. It didn't capture my humiliation. That feeling is private, but it did show the sequence of their choices and how those choices looked to anyone watching. Audrine didn't let the scene fester into spectacle. He asked for names. He asked for explanations. He listened. Then he made a decision. He stood at the front desk and, in a voice that did not rise into fury but rather settled like law, announced that the employees involved were terminated. Manager, receptionist, guards, bellboy, the staffer who filmed. One by one, they were relieved of their duties. It felt surreal. A page-turning moment in a story I hadn't consented to star in. People in the lobby shifted uncomfortably, as if they had been spectators of a play that suddenly named the fault line in its own plot. Some of the staff tried to apologize, others tried to argue. Adrien listened to the explanations and cut them short. "This is unacceptable," he said. "We have standards. We treat people with dignity." He asked Mr. Harper to remain on site, to pull the rest of the month's footage for a review, and to begin an immediate retraining program across the properties. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He exercised the kind of power that is sometimes wrapped in money and titles, but used it like someone who had decided, in a private moment long ago, that power was for preventing harm rather than causing spectacle. After they were escorted away, Adrien sat with me in the hotel lounge while I tried to breathe. He held my hand and let me talk about the diner, about the recipe cards, about the old life that sometimes feels foreign now. I could tell sorrow and anger warred in him. He said he never wanted me to feel small because of something he had built. He apologized for the scene in a way that didn't make it about him. "I'm sorry this happened to you," he said. "That should not have been allowed. There is a delicate line between public accountability and the urge to perform punishment." He walked it carefully. He made sure actions were tied to corporate policy. He instructed Mr. Harper to write a statement acknowledging the incident, to list the immediate firings, and to outline the next steps the company would take to ensure training and a culture shift. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He made room for consequences. We went home that night heavier than usual, as if the world had rearranged itself quietly while we were busy being ordinary. The videos did what videos do. They linearized the moment the elevator, the guards, the kicked cards into, a few minutes that were seen tens of thousands of times within hours. People reacted. Some sent hateful messages, assuming I was staging the whole thing. Others sent words of solidarity. Strangers who had been through variations of the same humiliation at the hands of gatekeepers who judge people by dress or accent or the polish of their shoes. My inbox filled with messages. Reporters called. A magazine wanted an interview. A morning show producer wanted to dramatize the scene. I said yes, in measured doses. I didn't want the story to be about spectacle. I wanted it to be about the people who had been shown that the system could be held accountable. What followed was an intense week of press and meetings. Mr. Harper and the corporate communications team released a statement acknowledging the incident, confirming the firings, and announcing immediate retraining. They said they were implementing sensitivity and hospitality workshops and reviewing staff vetting procedures. Language like policy changes and zero-tolerance filled press releases. I watched our life boil down to sound bites, and still I held on to the older woman's hands and the smell of coffee from the diner and the knowledge that change starts with choices, even small ones, made at a front desk. I also began to think about what could prevent this from happening again. It was not enough for a single hotel to act. This was not merely about those individuals. It was a cultural and institutional reflex to judge and to exclude that needed to be addressed. I spoke to Adrena about starting something practical, something that trained and empowered hospitality workers to see guests as people, not as problems. He listened. He didn't rush to open a foundation because it would look good. He opened it because he wanted to move the needle. We launched Dignity for All. Dignity for All started small. It offered workshops for frontline hospitality employees about unconscious bias and conflict It partnered with existing hospitality schools to fund scholarships for employees who wanted to pursue supervisory training. It set up a small emergency fund to help workers who found themselves unjustly dismissed while the company reviewed incidents and attempt to reduce the immediate economic punishment that often falls hardest on those with the least power. We tried to be concrete. No grand pronouncements, no miraculous cooties, just resources, training, and a sustained conversation about how to treat people. The foundation also created a set of guidelines the hotels could implement, clearer identification protocols, mandatory sensitivity sessions that included lived experience speakers, and an anonymous reporting channel for guests and staff. Mr. Harper oversaw an immediate pilot that rolled out within weeks. Staff across the company were required to complete the training, and many of them did it with open resistance that later softened into reflection. Change is slow. It is made of many small decisions, the ones that add up. Months later we returned to the Grand Meridian, not for drama, but to see whether the changes were real. I walked in with the same thrift store jeans, the same hair, pulled back, and Adrian at my side. This time the reception desk smiled, with an ease that felt genuine. Jessica's replacement, a young woman named Anna, greeted me by name, with warm courtesy. Patricia was gone. The lobby felt different. The employees I passed made eye contact and offered a quick word of welcome instead of a minute search into who they thought I should be. A server brought me a cup of coffee, and when he asked if I wanted cream, he actually listened to my answer. The Bell staff offered to take our bags with a hands-off politeness that didn't assume anything. The security team acknowledged me, and the guards now wore a discreet pin from the Dignity for All training, a quiet reminder that the work had reached them too. It was not theatrical, it was respectful. It was the kind of change that makes ordinary life easier for ordinary people. Throughout all of this, I held on to the fact that dignity is not a performance, it is a practice. It is a decision you make whenever you meet someone whose life looks different from yours. It's the difference between pretending not to see and actually pausing to help. It is the older woman picking up falling pages and handing them back with steady eyes. I have been asked, more than once, whether firing those people was the right choice. Could we have done something else? In my view, accountability and restoration are not opposites. Holding someone responsible for how they treated another human being does not exclude offering training and chances to learn. The line that must be drawn is between excusing harm and preventing it. Adrian's decision to terminate employment was a corporate action tied to behavior observed on camera. The foundation's work was a companion effort to change behavior before it became a headline. People want to know if I felt triumphant when the firings were announced. The truth is complicated. There was a sense of relief, yes, that the immediate injustice had been addressed in a visible way, but there was also sorrow. I had watched human beings act poorly toward another, and I did not wish to gloat at their loss. My aim was never revenge. My aim was to ensure nobody else would have to hold their cards against their chest while a man in a suit judged them on sight. There were quieter, more personal lessons too. I learned that a life shared with someone who holds power carries responsibilities I hadn't fully considered before, not the least of which is to use that power for repair, not for spectacle. I also learned that my identity was not something I had to shrink to fit someone else's image. There were suggestions both subtle and overt that I should dress the part if I wanted to avoid being judged. I refused. I refused to become less of myself so that someone else would feel at ease. My thrift store jeans didn't make me worthy or unworthy. They made me, me. The media, attention, for its part, did something important. It focused a public spotlight on a slice of daily life that some people never see. For others, it amplified a reflexive cruelty. For us, it offered momentum. Thousands of donations came in to support the foundation. Volunteers signed up to teach workshops. Hospitality schools opened their doors to low-income students, with scholarships funded by donors who felt moved to act. People shared their own stories, humiliations at hotels, airports, stores, many of them small, many of them large, all of them pointing to a pattern. I don't pretend the work is finished. Dignity for all is not a magic wand. We fight turnover and complacency and budget issues. We battle the natural tendency of institutions to revert to old habits when a headline fades. But we also see real things. A front desk manager who now diffuses confrontations before they escalate. A guard who learned to ask instead of assume. A Bell staff that now checks whether an elderly guest needs help without presuming they cannot pay. Those small choices ripple outward. And personally, I learned to accept help and to ask for it. It is frightening when the people you thought you didn't need suddenly become the ones who pick up the pieces, but it is also human. The older woman who helped me pick up those cards that day reached out after the broadcast. We met for coffee. She told me she had been a housekeeper at another hotel for 40 years. People forget we all wake up to the same sun, she said. And I cried because it was true. There were people who, in the months since reached out to say they had been on the other side of a similar moment, the one who judged and wanted to unlearn what they'd been taught. Some sent messages saying they had joined a training program and felt surprised at how useful it was. Others sent stories of businesses that implemented small policy changes as a result of the conversation. These are the quiet victories. I want to be clear about what happened and what it did not become. No arrests, no trials, no dramatic legal narratives played out beyond corporate staffing decisions and public accountability. People were fired for behavior documented on camera. The company instituted retraining and policy changes. A foundation was created to address the underlying culture. Those are the facts. Everything else is the story we tell to make sense of pain and hope. So many times, when people recount being humiliated, they say the worst part isn't the words or the shavit, is the sense that no one saw them as a person. They felt erased in a room full of onlookers. That older woman's steady hands made a difference because she saw me. Her act was small. It was human. It mattered. When I walk into places now, I carry that morning in the Grand Meridian in a different way. I don't go looking for trouble. I do go looking for moments to model the behavior I want to see. I give servers the time it takes to answer a question. I thank housekeepers. I listen to bell staff. Those little acts are not performative. They are deliberate. Some ask me whether I believe wealth should be used to call people out publicly. I believe wealth should be used to change systems. Adrian did both. He exercised the immediate authority of his position to address the harm as it happened, and he partnered with me to build a sustainable response. That combination is what turned a humiliating moment into a catalyst. That said, no single person or family can fix systemic bias. It takes communities, leaders, companies, educators, and everyday people making different choices over and over again. If there's a final thing I hope you take away from this, it's that dignity is not bestowed by privilege. It is recognized and practiced by people who choose to see others as human. When someone in power acts to correct wrongdoing, it matters. When ordinary people reach to pick up someone's scattered papers, it matters. When organizations train their staff to pause before judging, it matters. I won't pretend the journey hasn't been bittersweet. The moment in the lobby will live with me forever. The panic, the stacking of phones, the small kindness of a stranger. But I also carry the other images now. The conference room where we planned the foundation's first workshops. Mr. Harper sitting in the training session listening to a story from a former housekeeper. The bell staff who learned a phrase to ask before assuming. Those images are quiet proof that things can shift. A lot of people have written to ask what they can do. For me, the answer is simple. Treat people with dignity. In practical terms, support organizations that do the work, donate if you can, and volunteer your time to teach or mentor. If you work in hospitality, consider asking your employer about bias training or joining a conversation about policy. If you see someone being judged, step in safely and offer help. Sometimes, the smallest actions are the ones that make the greatest difference. Months after that day in the lobby, I went back to the diner where I used to work. The coffee tasted the same, burnt edges and all. The waitress remembered my order. We swapped stories about life. And for a while I was just Camila, a Gunda woman who loved a good playlist and liked to fold receipts into neat stacks. It felt like home. I tell this story not out of a desire to be applauded, but to make visible what often goes unseen. The slow ways people are pushed to the margins, the small moments of cruelty that add up, and the equally small acts that can push back. Adrian's action that day, his decision to hold people accountable, was the public payoff the title promises. But the deeper work, the foundation, the trainings, the change in individual attitudes, that's the part that keeps the promise alive. If you felt moved by this story, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to learn more about Dignity for All or support our work, you'll find a link in the description. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in the lobby that day? Would you have spoken up? Would you have reached for the recipe cards? The world can be kinder when we decide it will be. It takes one small choice after another until those choices add up to something larger than any single moment. Thank you for listening.